Okay, there it goes.
There it goes. All right. Thank you all for tuning in to today's Habitat webinar, Are Food Plots the Center of Your Wagon Wheel? My name is Jessica Cox. I'm the Quail Forever Farm Bill Biologist out of the Paris NRCS office. And today we are joined by Katrina Sims, the Quail Forever Farm Bill Biologist in the Harrison NRCS office. And our guest speaker today, Mr. Ralph Meeker, who is the Deer Program Coordinator with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. And today Ralph's going to be talking to you about different habitat management that you can do on your property, in addition to food plots that are really going to benefit your wildlife species, such as your deer, your turkey, and your quail. So again, thank you for joining, and I will turn it over to Ralph to begin his presentation.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, so let me see if I can share my screen here. All right. Am I sharing?
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome. So, like Jessica said, the title of my presentation are Food Plots, the Center of Your Wagon Wheel. Food plots are probably the most popular management practice when it comes to wildlife. Notice I didn't say the most important. I said the most popular. Not everyone will conduct a prescribed burn or fallow discs in their fields, but a lot of folks will manage their property at one time or another by using a food plot, especially deer hunters. In 2020, a survey conducted by Responsive Management found that deer hunters in the southeastern United States spend about $183 million on food plots annually. So that's a lot. That's a lot of time. When you talk about $183 million, that's a lot of time, resources, and money devoted to planting food plots. So the title of my topic are Food Plots, the Center of Your Wagon Wheel. So I'm not going to get too far down into the weeds when it comes to the specifics of food plots, but I do want to mention a few different things that you should consider. What I want to achieve today is a much broader topic about food plots and how they should fit into your habitat or your deer management picture. So with that being said, I do want to make one disclaimer. I'm not going to be promoting any specific product that I mentioned during my presentation. Food plots can be very complicated when it comes to chemicals, seeds, fertilizers, limes, different things. So I've been working on food plots on both public and private land for about 20 years. And I have learned one thing, that a lot of food plots, mixes, chemicals, etc., are site specific. So with that being said, what is a food plot? Very quickly, and very easily, it's a planting aimed at providing a supplemental food source for wildlife. It's just that, supplemental food source. Food plots are not a silver bullet, okay? Food plots will not alone fix a lot of issues that a property landowner may or may not have going on in their property. Food plots alone will not grow big bucks. They're not going to produce more deer. They're not going to fix a decline in turkey population. They're not going to bring back quail, and they're not going to reduce predation, whether it's nest predation, fawn predation, whatever. Food plots alone are not going to do that. Okay. So if it's not going to do those things, why do we plant a food plot? Well, for several different reasons. Number one, they increase habitat diversity. Again, a food plot provides food, so food availability is important. It can also provide cover if it's done properly and in the right situation. You can see that background, that's sorghum sudan and sunflower. That's great fawning habitat if you're whitetail deer. If you're a quail, if you're a rabbit, that also provides great cover. It can provide high quality forage if done properly, and with certain species. 10,000 pounds of forage per acre can be produced with a food plot. Now, there's also some important considerations there. about getting high quality and high quantity of forage. And I'll talk a little bit about those here in a minute. It also provides a better alternative to supplemental feed. When you plant a food plot, you more naturally provide forage on the landscape as opposed to a feeder or a corn pile, where all of those animals are eating out of the exact same location. So food plots better spread and provide food out more naturally for wildlife. And then lastly, it gets us active on the landscape. Again, like I said, the most popular wildlife management practice is probably food plots. Folks enjoy getting out on the tractor. They enjoy planting. And so food plots in that respect get us out there, get us participating with wildlife management. Now, also, it can help to increase animal nutrition. We can talk a little bit about that more in detail, but these are things that food plots can help do. They can help to increase the number and type of wildlife utilized in your property. It can also help to increase hunting success and wildlife viewing opportunities. So when are food plots primarily used? All right, so this graph is adapted from Food Plots and Supplemental Feeding, a book by Bob Griffin and Harry Jacobson, that some research they've done in Mississippi, and it shows in East Texas and in Mississippi when food plots are most utilized. That dotted green line there in the middle, that's the 50% mark. So above that, whitetail deer are using over 50% of the supplemental feedings or plantings during that time of the year. So in this particular instance, whitetail deer are primarily using food plot plantings. Number one, when vegetation, natural vegetation is scarce, or when energy demands are high. So there from May to August, when does are lactating, which requires a huge energy requirement, or when bucks are putting on antlers from May and June and really ending in about mid-July, those animals are really utilizing those food plots. So when native vegetation is scarce and when energy demands are high in whitetail deer, that's when these animals are most using food plots. So before you go down the food plot path, you should consider these things. Okay, number one, and probably the most important, is what is the purpose of your food plot? Are you trying to provide nutrition, or are you trying to provide an attractant? Know that a deer on average is going to eat between 6 and 9 pounds of vegetation per day. So on average, about 7.5 pounds per day. That's over 2,500 pounds in a year of vegetation that they're going to require. So how much vegetation or forage is a 1/4 acre food plot actually going to provide? If you get 1, 2, 5 deer on that food plot, there's not going to be much left of that food plot in a hurry. So define what your goal is for your food plot. If you're planting an annual, are you going to plant a perennial? Annual plants produce roots, vegetation, and their reproductive structures all in one year. So they have a very short life cycle. They grow very fast. They also provide a lot of biomass. However, annual plantings like soybeans, lab, iron clay peas, they are very susceptible to overgrazing. Okay, so if you think about planting those species, think about either planting a large food plot, or you're going to have some kind of exclusion fencing to allow those plants to get up, or you're going to have food plot failure. Okay, so spring planting versus fall planting, annual versus perennial plantings, and then of course the size of the food plot that's going to need to be required. The next thing is know your soil. If you're going to go through the effort and the money of planting a food plot, do it right. Do not skip a soil test. It's very, very important. The plants that come up in that food plot are only as productive as the soil that they're growing in. So conduct a soil test. Here in Arkansas, you can get your soil tests done for free through the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension Service, and follow the recommendations in that soil on that soil test. Liming and or fertilizing is extremely important. If you're going to skimp on the fertilizer. Do not skimp on the lime. 2 tons, let me repeat myself, 2 tons of lime per acre is not uncommon here in Arkansas. Our soils are rather acidic. There are a few places in Arkansas that do not require lime, but for the most part, most of our state is going to need lime. Lime is what is actually affixes to the hydrogen ions in the soil, that neutralizes that allows it to become neutral, and then that neutral soil allows plants to uptake the fertilizer, either the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and potassium that's actually in the soil. So do not skimp on the soil test, or do not skip the soil test, and do not skimp on liming your food plots. And then also know your seed and the plant itself. Okay. What is the planting depth? What is the seeding rate? Of course, all plants are going to need moisture. Here in Arkansas, it's very, very important when you plant your food plots to consider the timing of those food plots. With some type of rain event, you can have the best soil, best amended soil, the best designed food plot. And if you put the seed in the ground and it doesn't rain for 2 weeks, the germination rate on that is going to be very, very low. So ensure that you have adequate soil moisture when you're planting. Sunlight requirements. Some plants can get away with 5 hours of sun per day. Some plants require a lot more sunlight. A lot of your clovers, especially ladino clover, you can get away with less sunlight. But some plants, especially your iron clay peas, your soybeans, those type of plants, they're going to require a lot more sunlight during the day. So that's also going to help dictate what the size of your food plot is, what the orientation of your food plots are. So know those before you purchase your seed. When are those plants going to be available to wildlife? There is no seed, no plant out there, no food plot plant that's available, nutritious and palatable to whitetail deer all year. So again, based on what your purpose of your food plot is, it's going to be important to determine what species actually go in that plant or into that planting. Seed mixes. I get a lot of questions about, what is the magic seed mix? And I tell folks it's really dependent on what what and where your food plot is at. Unfortunately, a lot of seed mixes that you buy that are pre-mixed come with large and small seeds. Those seeds require different planting depths. So just understand that when you buy a pre-mixed seed like that, sometimes you may have better response on some of the seeds that are in that mix, and less response or less growth from other seeds. Avoid any mix, of course, that has ryegrass. Cereal rye is different than ryegrass. Okay, ryegrass is a noxious weed. Deer do not eat it unless they absolutely have to, like fescue. And then over time, it's going to be very difficult if you want to plant something else in that food plot to get rid of it. So do not plant ryegrass. And then the last thing is susceptibility to grazing pressure. And I mentioned that before. Some plants, you're going to have a food plot failure if deer graze on those plants too quickly after they germinate. So again, know your seed, know the plant. The last thing I would ask that you consider is what surrounds your food plot. This is a great looking food plot. This is one of those bow hunting food plots that's kind of tucked away. This one's actually planted on Crowley's Ridge. But if you'll look there around the edge of that food plot, it has what we consider a hard edge. So those deer, if you're bow hunting this plot, when do you think those deer are going to come out? They're probably going to come out very, very close to dark. Because they don't feel safe stepping out from that hard edge into the wide open, and unless they have the cover of darkness. Okay, so does it look like this, or do you have something that looks like this? Okay, this is a food plot on Fort Chaffee, where you see timber in the far left. Then you have this soft edge where you have saplings, grasses, some brush, and then that transitions down into the food plot. Okay, so think about a deer stepping out in the previous slide as opposed to this slide. This arrangement here may give you as a hunter, another 30 seconds, another 5 minutes to see that deer, whereas opposed to the slide before, those deer are not going to come out until dark. Okay, so this arrangement here is going to provide not only, a better opportunity to see deer, to coax deer out into the open, but also those deer feel more comfortable that once they're into the food plot, if they are spooked, they can very quickly get into cover. And that's the same way with quail, with turkeys, turkey poults, rabbits. There's going to be a lot more wildlife utilize this type of arrangement as opposed to the arrangement in the previous screen. So adjacent cover definitely helps. So, like I said before, food plots are an important part of a wagon wheel. They can be an important part, but they're not the only part. So again, like I said in the previous slide, adjacent cover helps, whether you're doing prescribed burns, you're doing chemical injection, edge development, timber cutting, timber thinning, strip disking, removing Bermuda grass, fescue, bahia grass. All of these things go into conjunction with your food plot. Food plot is an important part. It should not be the only part. So how does this all tie together? So here's a landowner that I worked with in Sebastian County. This person had 60 acres, so it's not a large piece of property, but there's a lot of potential. This individual was close to one of our wildlife management areas, so we knew we had a lot of different species in close proximity to his property. Him and his daughters hunted this property, and they wanted to improve it for wildlife. So 60 acres, not a large piece of property, but again, it's not necessarily the size of the property as to the design of the property. So the first thing that we did is we planted some pine trees. He had some difficulties with a couple of his landowners, adjacent landowners, shooting cross fence lines. So of course we created some screens along his property lines where his fences were, to kind of help alleviate that. That also helped provide additional travel corridors. The interior pine plantings there, he designated that, and the hardwoods there on the south end as a sanctuary. So those were areas that they're not going to hunt, and so they're going to reduce that internal hunting pressure there in the center of his property. The next thing we did was we worked with a local farm service agency to enroll him into a program called CP22. And what this does is it plants hardwood trees on buffers along waterways. These were first order streams, and so we were able to plant out 180 feet with hardwoods. So that's over time. Of course, it's going to take some time for those hardwoods to produce acorns, but what we basically did is improve the travel corridor down the center of his 60 acres. Again, this is going to provide great fawning habitat early on, great quail habitat early on, great nesting habitat for turkeys early on. And so, again, creating those travel corridors, improving cover onto his property. The next thing we did was we set out, all right, now that we know where sanctuaries are, now we know where our travel corridors are going to be, where are we going to place our food plots? So looking at soils map and the aerial map, also we used a topography map because he did have some slight topography changes on this property. We decided that these were going to be the best locations for his food plots. Not only have they have good soils, but they were easily accessible without having disturbed them, knowing where our travel corridors and our sanctuary was at. The next thing we did is we sprayed out fescue and Bermuda that he had in his fields. We wanted to promote that back into early successional habitat that's predominant with forbs, grasses, and shrub scrub. So this is early successional habitat. Again, great fawning habitat for whitetail deer, turkeys, quail, and great pollinator habitat as well. So once we had the design in place, now we had to figure out how we're going to manage this. Next thing we did was we designed where his fire breaks were going to be. We put his fire breaks in not only to help us manage the early successional areas, but also to provide access, so we could double them as roads for him, or ATV trails. So all of our early successional habitat was surrounded. At the same instance, we're protecting our early tree plantings. And then we built a timeline. When is he going to burn each one of these units? Again, him and his daughters hunted this property. Him and his daughters and his buddy. So, you know, we wanted to break these burn units up in ways that were manageable for them to do for the two of them. So we didn't want to disturb all of his early successional habitat at one time. And so we broke it up into multiple burn units. So with that being said, this is my contact information. Again, if you got any questions, feel free to email me. You can also go on to our Arkansas Game and Fish Commission website, go into private lands biologist. You can get a complete list of our private lands biologist folks that work with landowners, whether they're developing food plots, farm bill programs. We also have a group that Quail Forever that Jessica will be happy to talk about, but all of these folks are focused on helping landowners manage private property. So with that, I thank you guys for allowing me to be here, and feel free to contact me with any questions.
All right. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation, Ralph. That was a lot of very good information that I hope folks can take back with them onto their properties. And before we finish up with this webinar, I just wanted to let you all know that if you are interested in doing any habitat management work on your properties, there are really good resources that you can reach out to, whether that's just for technical assistance or possibly some cost share assistance that's also available for landowners to implement some of these practices that Ralph talked about. You can go to quailforever.org and go scroll to the bottom and click on Find a Biologist. And that'll take you to the nearest farm bill biologist with Quail Forever in your area. You can reach out to them for technical assistance on your property to come out and do a site visit and offer some recommendations on what you can do and to help you get signed up for some of those cost share opportunities. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission also has private lands biologists, and you can go to the Arkansas Game and Fish website and find the closest biologists to your property. Again, thank you so much, Ralph, for getting on. Very good information, and we hope to see you all soon on another webinar. Thanks.